You know that feeling the night before a job interview? You're lying in bed, it's like 11:30, and instead of sleeping, you're basically rehearsing the whole thing in your head. You're thinking about your handshake, should it be firm, too firm? You're replaying that one gap in your resume and mentally preparing 17 different ways to explain it. You've got 17 tabs open on your phone, all some version of how to ace a job interview. And honestly, the more you read, the more anxious you feel, because every article is telling you something slightly different, and none of it sounds like anything a real human being would actually say out loud. And then the interview happens, and somewhere around the 15-minute mark, you can feel it. Not going badly, exactly, just not landing. The interviewer is polite, pleasant even, but there's this invisible wall between you and them, and you can't figure out where it came from or how to get past it. You leave the building and do that thing where you stare at the floor in the elevator, running through everything you said, trying to figure out what went wrong. A few days later, you get the email. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. And you sit there thinking, what did I miss? My name is Roger, and I spent 14 years on the other side of that table. Hiring manager at 2 Fortune 500 companies, part of hundreds of interview panels, personally involved in hiring decisions that range from entry-level coordinators all the way up to senior leadership roles. And I'll be honest with you, I got into this whole habit of studying interviews, not because I was particularly passionate about HR processes, but because I kept watching genuinely talented people fail interviews they should have won over and over again. And I kept watching significantly less qualified candidates walk away with offers because of something that had almost nothing to do with what was on their resume. That gap, the gap between who should get the job and who actually gets the job, that's what I've spent years trying to understand. And what I've learned is that interviews are not primarily an intelligence test or a qualifications check. They are, underneath all the professional formality, a social connection test. And most people have no idea they're even being evaluated on that dimension. What I want to share with you today are 15 rules, things I watched work, things I watched fail, patterns I noticed after hundreds and hundreds of conversations that can genuinely shift how you show up in an interview room. Not tricks, not scripts, just a deeper understanding of what's actually happening in that room and how to navigate it in a way that feels actually pretty natural once you get it. Let's get into it. Rule 1, understand what the interviewer actually wants from the next hour. Here's something almost nobody thinks about before they walk into an interview. The interviewer doesn't necessarily want to be there either. They've got a full job. They've got deadlines. They've probably already sat through 4 or 5 conversations that day, most of which were exhausting. And they're quietly hoping, maybe even praying, that you're going to be the person who makes their search easy, who makes their afternoon not terrible. What that means practically is that the interviewer is not your adversary. They are not trying to catch you out. They want you to be good. They want this conversation to feel easy. The moment you internalize that, something shifts in how you carry yourself. You stop bracing for an attack that was never coming, and you start showing up more like someone having a professional conversation with a person who genuinely hopes it goes well. The actionable part of this is simple. Before any interview, remind yourself, this person wants me to succeed today. They're rooting for me. Not unconditionally, not without standards, but genuinely. Walk in carrying that, and your energy changes in a way that's subtle but visible. Rule 2, research the human, not just the company. Everyone does company research. Mission statement, recent news, maybe a product or two they mention in the first 5 minutes to prove they prepared. Honestly, interviewers can tell when it's surface level. They've heard, "I really admire your company's commitment to innovation," approximately 9,000 times. What almost nobody does is research the specific person they're meeting. And this is where you can create instant, genuine connection that nobody else in that hiring cycle will create. LinkedIn takes 10 minutes. What did this person do before they joined the company? What did their career path look like? Have they been quoted anywhere, spoken at a conference, written anything? I once interviewed a woman who, within the first 2 minutes, mentioned she'd read a piece I'd contributed to an industry newsletter 3 years earlier and asked me whether my thinking on the topic had changed. I was stunned. I didn't even remember writing it, but the fact that she had found it read it, and formed a real question about it, told me more about how she would show up in that job than anything else she said for the rest of the hour. You don't need to go that deep, but knowing one specific thing about the human being you're meeting transforms your questions from generic to genuinely interesting. And interesting questions start good conversations. Good conversations get people hired. Rule 3, ask more questions than they ask you. I know, this sounds backwards. The interviewer asks the questions, right? That's how it works. Except, no, not if you want to win. Think about what happens from the interviewer's side when every single candidate sits down and waits to be questioned. It is a relentless, draining experience of pulling information out of people for hours on end. Now picture the candidate who sits down and within the first few minutes asks a thoughtful, specific question. Suddenly the whole dynamic shifts. The interviewer gets to talk, they get to be interesting, they get to share something they care about. And here's the thing about human psychology that is so reliable, it's almost funny we like people who find us interesting. We trust people who ask us questions. We feel connected to people who seem curious about our experience. The rule here is not to pepper them with questions or turn it into an interrogation in reverse. Ask one good open-ended question. Listen fully to the answer. Then ask a follow-up based on what they actually said, which signals that you were genuinely listening and not just loading up the next question while they were talking. That cycle of question, listen, follow-up, do that 2 or 3 times in an interview, and you have created more connection than 90% of the other candidates they'll see that week. Rule 4, mirror their communication style before you try to stand out. This one is subtle, but it might be the most powerful thing on this entire list. Every person has a communication rhythm. Some people are measured and deliberate, choosing words carefully, comfortable with pauses. Others are fast-paced, expressive, warm, a little scattered in the best way. Some interviewers are formal, some are casual, some use a lot of industry jargon, some speak in plain language. When you walk into a room and your energy or communication style is dramatically different from the person you're meeting, there's friction. It's not conscious and it's not judgmental. It's just 2 mismatched rhythms trying to sync up, and that friction registers in the interviewer's brain as mild discomfort. Mild discomfort, over the course of an hour, becomes a vague sense that something was off. That becomes a no. Mirroring, deliberately matching the pace, tone, energy level, and vocabulary of the person you're with removes that friction. If they're quiet and careful, slow down. If they're warm and expansive, open up. If they use specific terminology, reflect it back. You're not pretending to be someone you're not. You're just tuning to their frequency before you find your own voice within that frequency. It's actually a really natural thing to do once you start paying attention to it. Rule 5, turn every answer into a 2-way exchange. Most candidates answer questions like they're filling out a form. Question comes in, answer goes out, silence falls, next question. It's not bad, exactly, it's just flat. And flat conversations don't create the kind of warmth that leads to someone going to bat for you in a hiring meeting. The technique here is simple. Answer the question completely, then briefly turn it back with something genuine. That's how I handled it in that situation. Is that kind of dynamic something that comes up on this team, or is the structure pretty different here? You've answered their question, shown self-awareness, and opened a conversation all in one move. I'll be honest, this felt a little mechanical to me the first time someone explained it, but watching it in practice changed my mind completely. The interviews where this happened consistently felt like conversations I was having with a peer, not someone I was evaluating. And people you feel like peers with are people you want on your team. Rule 6, never walk in without knowing what their actual problem is. Every open role exists because something is unresolved. Either the company is growing and needs capacity, or a specific function is struggling, or someone left and left a gap, or there's a new initiative that nobody currently has the skills to lead. Whatever it is, there is a problem underneath this job posting. And every single person in that building will be impressed by and slightly disarmed by a candidate who demonstrates they understand what the problem actually is. Before any interview, dig for this. What does the role description emphasize most? What skills show up twice? What language is slightly anxious or urgent? Read between the lines. And then in the interview, ask directly, what does success look like in this role 6 months from now? Almost nobody asks this. It's one of those questions that I promise you will make the interviewer pause and look at you slightly differently, because it signals that you're already thinking about performance, not just employment. Once you know what success looks like to them, every answer you give can be quietly framed as a direct path to that outcome. You're not telling your story anymore. You're presenting a solution. That's a different and far more persuasive conversation. Rule 7. Speak specifically, never generally. General answers are forgettable. Specific answers are not. I'm a strong communicator means nothing to an interviewer who has heard it 600 times. In my last role, I noticed our project updates were creating more confusion than clarity, so I redesigned the weekly reporting format, and within 2 months, our cross-functional meetings went from 90 minutes to 45. That is a specific, visual, memorable thing. I can picture it, I can evaluate it, I can tell it's real. Every time you're tempted to say something general, I work well under pressure. I'm a team player. I'm detail-oriented. Stop. Replace it with a story. One specific moment, one specific challenge, one specific outcome. Specific stories do 2 things simultaneously. They prove the claim, and they make you a 3-dimensional person rather than a collection of resume bullet points. 3-dimensional people are easier to advocate for in a hiring meeting. Rule 8. Handle the weakness question like someone who actually knows themselves. Oh, the weakness question. I have seen this destroy more otherwise strong interviews than almost anything else. There are 2 failure modes. The first is the fake weakness. I'm a perfectionist. I care too much. I just work too hard sometimes. Interviewers hate this. Not because they're mean, but because it signals either dishonesty or a complete lack of self-awareness. And both of those things are genuinely scary in a potential employee. The second failure mode is the unframed real weakness. I struggle with public speaking, full stop, no context, no arc, just dropping a problem and walking away from it. Now the interviewer is just sitting with a concern and nothing to do with it. The right structure. Name the weakness genuinely. Describe when you noticed it and why it was a problem. Explain what you actually did about it and describe where you are with it now. The arc matters. The arc is the whole point, because the weakness question isn't really about your weakness. It's about whether you're the kind of person who knows yourself, faces uncomfortable truths, and does something about them. That's who people want working alongside them. Rule 9. Read the room in real time and adjust. An interview is a live social interaction. Information is flowing from the interviewer constantly through their body language, their expressions, the speed of their responses, and most people are too in their own heads to notice any of it. Leaning forward means they're engaged, go deeper. A glance at a phone or watch means wrap up. A slight furrow of the brow when you said something means something didn't quite land, address it, or at least notice it. Eyes lighting up when you mention something means there's more interest there, follow it. I used to watch candidates barrel through their prepared answers while I was visibly interested in something they'd mentioned briefly, basically begging them to go deeper on it, and they just steamroll past it because they were following their internal script, not the actual conversation. Your internal script is a starting point, not a track to run on. Let the conversation tell you where to go. The candidates who could do this, adjust in real time based on what the room was giving them, were almost always the candidates we hired. Rule 10. Silence is a tool. Use it. Most people are terrified of silence in an interview. The moment a pause appears, they rush to fill it, usually with more words that dilute what was actually a strong answer. Here's the counterintuitive reality. When you answer a question well and then stop, the silence does something. It lets what you said actually land. It communicates that you're not anxious, not desperate, not scrambling. It signals that you're someone who knows when something is complete. That is a genuinely rare quality, and it registers as quiet confidence in a way that's hard to manufacture through any other means. Practice this specifically. Give your answer and then pause. Resist the urge to add one more thing. Let the pause breathe. It will feel incredibly uncomfortable the first few times. It will start to feel natural, and once it feels natural, It becomes one of the most effortlessly powerful things you can do in any high-stakes conversation. Rule 11. Handle unexpected questions with a beat of honesty. Every interview has that moment. The question you didn't prepare for. The hypothetical you can't immediately parse. The challenge to something you just said that you weren't expecting. Most candidates panic in that gap and start talking before they know what they want to say. And you can hear it in their voice, the speed, the slight incoherence, the trailing off that happens when someone realizes mid-sentence that they don't actually know where they're going. The better move is brutally simple. Take a breath. It's okay to say, "That's a really good question. Let me think about that for a second," and actually mean it. Literally thinking for 2 or 3 seconds before you speak signals composure under pressure, not slowness. The interviewer is not evaluating the speed of your answer. They're watching how you handle the discomfort of not immediately knowing. And a candidate who can sit comfortably in that uncertainty and then produce a coherent, structured response is demonstrating exactly the kind of working under pressure capability that every hiring manager actually cares about. Rule 12. Show genuine curiosity about the role, not just enthusiasm for it. There's a version of interview enthusiasm that honestly reads as slightly desperate. It's the "I am so excited about this opportunity" energy, the excessive nodding, the almost performative positivity. Interviewers can feel when enthusiasm isn't quite connected to anything real. What lands much better is curiosity. Curiosity is enthusiasm with a foundation. It sounds like I've been thinking about how this role sits between the product team and the marketing function, and I'm genuinely curious how that tension gets navigated day to day, because that kind of intersection is where I've found I do my most interesting work. That's specific, that's grounded. That tells the interviewer you've thought about the actual job, not just the idea of having a job. Curiosity also signals something important, that you're someone who pays attention, who finds things interesting, who engages with the world around them. Those qualities are attractive in a colleague in a way that generic enthusiasm is not. Rule 13. Own your story, especially the uncomfortable parts. Gaps in your resume, a short stint somewhere, a role that didn't end well, a career pivot that might look directionless from the outside. These are the things candidates dread being asked about, and the dread shows in the hedging, the over-explaining, the slight change in energy that happens when the topic comes up. Here's what I learned watching hundreds of these moments. Interviewers are not nearly as bothered by the facts as they are by how you relate to them. A 6-month gap explained with calm, clear context is fine. A 6-month gap explained with visible anxiety and defensive overjustification makes the interviewer feel like there's something being hidden even when there isn't. Own it. Simply, I left that role because the environment had become pretty toxic and I decided my mental health was more important than the resume continuity. I spent 4 months deliberately, then started looking. That's honest, that's mature, that shows self-respect and good judgment. Those things are not red flags. They're green ones. For the right hiring manager. Rule 14. Prepare a closing question that's actually good. Do you have any questions for us? At the end of every interview, this question comes, and most candidates either say, "No, I think you've covered everything," which signals passivity and a lack of genuine interest. Or they ask something generic like, "What does the day-to-day look like?" Which, at the end of a 1-hour conversation, should probably already be clear. The question you ask at the end matters, not because there's a magic question, but because it's your final impression, and final impressions stick. Good closing questions are specific and forward-looking. What would make someone genuinely thrive in this role, beyond what's in the job description? Good. What's the thing about this team that you think outsiders most misunderstand? Really good. Is there anything from our conversation today that gave you any hesitation that I could address? Bold, a little vulnerable, and extraordinarily effective because it lets you handle concerns while you're still in the room, which is something almost no other candidate will ever think to do. Whatever you ask, make sure it's something you actually want to know the answer to. Genuine curiosity sounds like genuine curiosity, and genuine curiosity is the note you want to end on. Rule 15. Win the last 4 minutes as deliberately as you won the first 4. This is the one most people completely forget. They're mentally halfway out the door before the conversation's even over. The energy drops, the answers get shorter, the handshake is a little too quick, and they're gone. There's a psychological principle called the peak end rule. It basically says that human beings don't remember experiences as an average of all the moments in them. They remember the most emotionally intense moment, and they remember how it ended. Those two data points carry disproportionate weight in how an experience gets stored and recalled. What this means practically is that the last 4 minutes of your interview are some of the most important minutes in the whole conversation. Before you leave, reference something specific from what they said. I really appreciated what you shared about how the team handled that transition period. That's the kind of challenge I'd actually want to be part of. That says, I was listening, I cared, I was here. Express your interest in terms of what you actually discussed, not generically. I came in genuinely interested, but this conversation made me want this more. That's specific and real, and they'll feel the difference. Then walk out with eye contact, a real handshake, and an energy that says interested, not desperate, not indifferent, but genuinely, quietly interested. That's the last thing they'll feel as you leave the building. Make it count. I want to be straight with you for a second, because I think there's a version of this kind of content that leaves people feeling like they just need to run the right plays and the job is guaranteed. That's not what I'm saying. Interviews are unpredictable. Sometimes you do everything right and you don't get the job because the internal candidate was always going to get it, or because the role gets canceled, or because the chemistry just wasn't there despite everyone's best efforts. But here's what I know after 14 years of sitting on that side of the table. The candidates who consistently get offers, who build reputations as people, who interview well, who seem to get hired every time they decide they want to be, they're not exceptional in some magical way. They've just understood something most people haven't, that the interview is not a test you take, it's a conversation you have. And the quality of that conversation, the curiosity in it, the warmth, the specific stories, the genuine listening, the moments of real connection. That's what the whole thing ultimately comes down to. The qualifications are the entry ticket. Everything else is the conversation. What I hope you take from this isn't a checklist to run through while you're sitting nervously in a waiting room. I hope you take a slightly different understanding of what's actually happening in that room. The interviewer is human. They have a problem they're trying to solve. They're hoping you're the solution. They're watching how you handle pressure, how you listen, how you respond when something unexpected happens, how you carry yourself when silence falls. They're asking themselves quietly, continuously, could I work alongside this person? Would I want to? Your job is to answer that question clearly, not through performance, through presence. You already have things to offer that are real and specific and genuinely valuable. The 15 rules I've shared are just about making sure those things actually land, instead of getting lost in the gap between who you are and how you come across in a 90-minute conversation with a stranger. Go in curious. Go in prepared. Ask more than you answer. Listen like it matters, because it does. Own your story without apology. And for the love of everything, stick around mentally for the last 4 minutes. You've got more than you think you have. It's time to let that show.